Welcome back to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kieran. Today's episode holds grief, strength, motherhood, mindfulness, and the kind of honesty that I feel like is medicine, because nothing good ever comes from pretending everything is fine. Our guest is someone whose story, resilience, and heart have stayed with me since the moment I learned about her journey. I'm honored to sit down with Reshma Kearney, a mother of 3 and a mindfulness-based grief support practitioner who knows firsthand what it means to lose so deeply and slowly rebuild. In 2022, Reshma's husband died by suicide. Her world cracked open, and instead of covering it back up, she chose to walk through it with intention. Reshma now shares her story with others, working through grief, offering mindful tools and soft space for pain to be witnessed, not fixed. She says grief changes us, but mindfulness helps us find steadiness and strength in the process. We're going to learn a little bit about that today. Also, in honor of Children's Mental Health Month, we're going to be talking about what it means to parent through grief, how children understand loss, and also hear the voice of young people, particularly Reshma's kids, and what they wish we knew, what they wish other young people knew about grief and loss. We're also going to spend some time unpacking the power of mindfulness, what it actually looks like in the hardest of moments, and why we need to stop whispering the word suicide, as if silence will protect us. Reshma, welcome to Middle Fingers Up. Let's get into it. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored. How are you today?
Thank you for asking. I'm doing good too. I also feel honored that you're trusting us with your story, with your journey. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Definitely something that's needed, and hoping for our community to gain some insight about some of the hardships that we go through when we're experiencing grief and loss. So I'm going to just get right into it, because there's no better way, I think, than to have the conversation. So I would love, if you're okay, to start at the beginning with the loss. And I'm hoping that you can take us back to the time in 2022 when your husband died. What do you remember about those early days of loss?
It was September 2022, and we had just reunited. The kids and I had just moved out to the Seattle area in the summer prior. Earlier that year, at the end of December, my husband Sean had gotten out of the Army. And so earlier in 2022, he had made the move out to Washington State, where we had been waiting for years to get back to. And the kids and I stayed in Augusta, Georgia to finish out their school year. So we reunited in around June, July of 2022. And we were on a high as a family, back together. And we were in the place that we had been hoping to get back to for years, and just kept dreaming about how amazing the future was going to be. And the summer was great. We traveled a lot. We were getting settled in our new area. And I would say toward the end of the summer, beginning of September, I started to see a shift in Sean's behavior. And I saw, and I should backtrack a bit, depression and anxiety wasn't a new thing So even if I started to see it then in the fall of 2022, it wasn't something new to me. It was an ongoing struggle for him. And every year there would be something that would kind of bring him down, and I would help him get back up, and then we would keep it moving. And so I just chalked it up to, this is just growing pains, being in a new area, joining private practice. He's stressed, he's feeling inadequate. And so I just kept supporting him in the way that I normally did. And the week before he passed away, it was really like a lot of highs and lows. Our youngest daughter just turned 7. We had a birthday party for her the weekend before. You would have never thought there was anything going on. He did all the things that husbands do during birthday parties, right? Pick up the cake, complain a little bit on the side, but he was acting like he normally did. And during the week, he was preparing to go away for a fishing trip. And that was coming up the weekend after. And he was also working. So there were some things at work that were coming up that were challenging. And then he was trying to pack for this trip. So the night before he passed away, he did say to me that he didn't want to go on the fishing trip, that he didn't feel like going. And again, I had no idea what was going on in his head. So I encouraged him to go. And I even did you've been planning this with your friend for a long time. You can't back out now. It's in 2 days. And I didn't know.
Yeah.
So looking back, I wish I had known, because I would have said, no, absolutely, you're not going. Let's get you some help. But up until the night before, he was planning on going. And we went to bed separately because he went to bed earlier. And I just did the, sleep revenge scrolling at night. And the next morning, he didn't wake up when I did. So I just got up and started my day. I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe he had a later start. And the usual routine was I'd go downstairs, get the kids up and start making their lunches. And then I'd run back upstairs and change into workout clothes and walk the kids to school. That day was different because I had a COVID shot and a flu shot the day before, so I didn't feel well. And I told the kids, I'm just going to walk you around the corner in my pajamas, and then I'll go back home. So I did that. And we were probably gone for 5 minutes. And when I came back, I saw that Sean's car was still in the driveway. And I was really surprised by that, because that wasn't typical. And I came back in the house and decided to go back up and get ready. And I couldn't get into the room. So I had to pry myself in, and I found him.
You have, I imagine, shared this story so many times, probably gone through it in your head so many times. Mm-hmm. Does it get better, or does it feel different as you share the story, as you walk through the steps and sort of what happened that day leading up to it?
Every time I tell it, it's different, because I can actually feel my breath caught in my chest, which is something I tell other people to be mindful of,
Yeah.
Deep breaths from the belly. But yeah, I can feel it in my chest when I tell you today. But yeah, it is much lighter. And I think that was part of the work I did on my own soon after he passed away. The images would keep popping up in my mind, and I would allow them to. Yeah. And it wouldn't matter where I was. If I was driving and they started coming up in my head, I would just let them go. I'd let them flow in my mind, and I would walk myself through the scenes in my mind and allow myself to just replay it over and over. And I think because I did that over time in a really healthy way, I became, I don't want to say numb to it, because it still evokes a lot of feeling, but just I was able to talk about it and see things and not freeze. I was able to just go with it.
Yeah, I mean that's like we're going to talk about mindfulness and we're going to talk about some of what you did there cuz you and I talked about in our consult a professional friend in the field when you shared that you did that had said, "Oh my god, you do what we teach our clients to do," and it naturally came to you. And so I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. I also want to go back for a second because when you were sharing, you had said like, "Oh, hindsight," right? Like, I wish I had known that or thought about that. And I think hindsight is such a bitch because
Mm-hmm.
what we know after isn't what we know during. And then I know for me, when I'm in that hindsight moment, it feels all these feels, guilt, crappiness, I wish I'd known, whatever. Who knows if the moment would have changed or not, or the situation would have been different. But did you find yourself in that hindsight space after the loss of Sean? And if so, like, how did you walk your way out of that? Because I think a lot of people would relate to that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's part of why I really cringe when I see the suicide prevention campaigns. I mean, I get it. There are some people who exhibit these concrete signs. But in my case, and in the case of so many others, there aren't those concrete signs. Sean didn't give away his belongings. He didn't totally disconnect with everybody around him. He didn't talk about not being in the world. In fact, he was planning trips as far out as the holidays, like Christmas and New Year's. And so I do, not so much now, but in those initial months, I did keep going back. Oh, what if I had done this? What if I had done that? And even what if I had just gone back up to the room before walking the kids and given him a kiss, or had the kids go up and say bye? I mean, we didn't normally do that because we wanted him to rest if he was resting. It has taken a lot of self-talk to get out of that space of guilt. And it's also taken just reminders from people who were close to us, including some family, to accept that this was his choice and this is where he was at the time. And I couldn't have stopped it. And maybe I could have stopped it that day, but then maybe it would have happened another time. I don't know. And at a certain point, you just have to tell yourself you only have this much energy. And I'm now a solo parent, a widow, and a mom of 3 young kids who need me more than ever. So I can't use any of that energy beating myself up. I have to just accept what happened and trust that I'm doing the right thing. And I did the right thing. Trust that I did all that I could do because I loved him. And I really, every time I tried to help him, I really did put my heart into it.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you sharing the honesty behind the could I have, should I have, would I have? Because I think a lot of us when we're going through grief, we live in those places, and ultimately it comes down to trying to control something that we couldn't have when the situation, in this case, Sean's death happened. What cracked open in you during the time of finding him? I'm curious if I can ask. Like, was it something emotional? I don't know, something otherwise? Like, what happened when you found him?
It was shock, just complete shock. And I couldn't even walk into the room. Like I might have taken a couple of steps in. And then as soon as I knew what happened, I backed out. Like I didn't even turn around. I just backed out. And I had my phone on me. And the first thing I did was call 911. I didn't even know why I thought to do that. It's just that's what I did. And but really I didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
But it was shock. And it's interesting because I was shocked in the moment and afraid. And my first concern was my kids. But then after processing and replaying and thinking more about Sean and where he was in life, I remember telling somebody I I wasn't surprised that he didn't want to be in the world anymore. So I was shocked that he got to that point and ended his life and that I found him. But looking back, I'm not surprised that he didn't want to be in the world anymore.
When you come to that place and you realize that about a loved one, in this case, your partner, what what goes through your mind? How do you work through that when you realize, okay, I'm not actually surprised by this? And likely those around you would be surprised because people don't know what happens in our world and when we're down, when we're depressed, when we're going through mental health issues. So like for you, how did you manage that in the realization of I'm not surprised?
Uh, it felt lonely because, like you said, people on the outside were surprised, and people on the outside thought we were this perfect family, successful, thriving, finally moving to where we wanted to be, three beautiful children. And so to finally admit that there was a major problem and that problem changed our lives forever and ended his, like, you feel lonely. And I know that in the moment, whether I knew what was coming like a year and a half later when I started sharing my story or not, I think I knew in that moment that if I had been able to share more of this, or if he had felt safe to share more of this, maybe we wouldn't be here
Mhm.
in this situation.
I think that's like such an important message for all of us because we hold on to things that we can't make sense of, are never taught how to make sense of. There's all these reasons why we hold such important big feelings so deep inside, and they always find a way out, whether it's on our body, whether it's through our well-being or not, and we all know that. But for some reason we think we're different and we can't seem to give ourselves permission to talk about it. And I think we come from a collective care community, and that's one thing South Asians are really good at, being there for people. When it comes to these deep, deep, deep things, I think we really do struggle with how to show up for each other because we ultimately want everyone to just be okay, or this thing of like always be happy. And I don't think that's possible. I mean, we can't always be happy. We have
Mhm.
to know how to feel other emotions. And so how did you sort of work through some of this, loneliness with your community, with your family, who's, I don't know, trying to be, I would imagine, try to be there in the way that they all think is, the best way, but no one knows what to do. And no one really necessarily even says, I don't know what to do right now. We just all try to fix something. So how did you work through some of that with your loved ones?
I didn't really talk to anybody for the first month. I allowed everyone to talk to me
Oh.
through texts or through messages or cards or gifts, and when I say through messages, I mean like through my parents. Somebody would tell my parents to tell me something. But I think it took a good month or longer before I actually got on the phone or texted someone back. If people messaged me, I'd like the message to let them know that I got it and I appreciated it. But it took me a long time to actually talk. And even then, I was pretty guarded until maybe 2 months later. I felt more comfortable telling like a little bit more about what happened and how I was feeling. But I, I think what was important for me though is just knowing that everybody was there and they were giving me the time and space and they were waiting. And I was really grateful that I had family abroad who really wanted to come immediately, but they respected my wishes when I said I this is not the time that I want you to come here and visit me. If you're going to come visit me, I want it to be when we can like really enjoy each other. So yeah, everyone waited for me.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that you were also able to be where you were in the moment. And, as a woman, South Asian woman, on top of it, the need to care for everyone else around, make sure everyone else is okay. But at the same time, in order for you to do that for others, you have to also take care of you. And I'm just wondering, in those early days, I would imagine there would be so much pressure to like bounce back. You're a mom, and sometimes we are kids, but we also feel like we have to take care of our parents when there's something tragic that happens in our loved ones. And it's good that people wait and they were there. but I still feel these feelings are inside. And so, especially for moms, real grief doesn't work in the way of just bouncing back. And I think we also understand grief has no timeline. And so I'm just wondering if we can maybe kind of get into how all this unfolded for you as a mom for a minute. So, like, I'm just trying to make sense of woman to woman, mom to mom. Like, you're not just grieving as a partner, but also a mother of three. And so that's enormous weight to carry in itself. And how did you make space for your own grief while also holding the space for your kids?
Well, I didn't do that at first. I think that the only reason I got out of bed every morning was because of the kids. I wasn't thinking about myself at all. I remember I wore like the same 3 or 4 things, like just on repeat. I didn't care at all about myself. I got out of bed, moved robotically just for them, them to school, and then I would immediately go back home and start doing all the paperwork. And there's a lot of stuff that you have to do after your partner passes away, and we just don't know and we're not prepared. And when you're in your 40s, you're not even thinking about. He wasn't even thinking about that because he left me in quite a mess, actually. So I it took me time to realize that I needed to start taking care of myself and giving myself the time and the space to grieve. So I started doing that. I would take them to school, but then I would force myself to walk I started at like 20 minutes, and I would do that. And then I'd go back and jump into everything, but I still had that time. And then I would add on a phone call to my dad every morning for 20 minutes. And that helped me process things that I had to do. But I think it also gave my dad peace of mind because I was in Washington still, and they are in California. And so it would be my time to check in with my parents. And then over time, I started doing a little bit more, bringing back in my time at the gym and yoga, and then slowly connecting with other people. And it got to a point where then I blocked off time every day just for myself so that I could process things or say, read about grief or connect with some type of grief resource. But I became very protective of that time because I saw that it was helping me heal.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's the thing you're going to get into mindfulness in a moment, but when you are present and trying to truly be present in the midst of all this, we learn what's happening for us and that why we're doing what we're doing, why we're doing tasky things, why we're pausing the process part, why we're open to it, all these kinds of things. When we can be intentional about it, I think it does help us work through the healing process as well. As we said, grief has no timeline. So there's good days, there's bad days, there's ugly days. And so we kind of have to work off of that. What did you learn about yourself that maybe you didn't know about yourself as a mom during this grief process?
I think I learned that as long as I put my heart and intention into everything that I was doing for the kids, they were getting the best of me. So after Sean passed away, everything changed, and it's still so much different than the life we had or the life we could have had. And I have learned since then, and I'm continuing to learn, that my kids just need my heart. That's all they need. And that takes a lot of pressure off. And in fact, there was a moment recently where I talked to them about how our life is so different because I was a stay-at-home mom when Sean passed away. I had been at home for 10 years by then. And now I'm trying to build a business and I'm taking care of the 3 of them by myself, and I'm managing finances, and my time isn't as limitless for them. And I asked them about that. Do you still feel loved by me? I can't give you so much attention. I'm on my phone more. I'm on my computer. I don't cook the way I used to. Do you still feel loved by me? And they said yes. And all three of them like very quickly said yes and then gave me examples. And so I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned as a mom.
Oh, I said I wasn't going to get emotional, but you made me emotional. This is your fault. I just, I just feel like
it's okay.
I think the
No,
reason
it's
why
not.
I'm
That's
getting
okay.
emotional is just what you said about like that's what they need at the end of the day is our heart. And I think sometimes we shield it so much as grown-ups because we have to provide finances, we have to do the day-to-day to make them feel love that we kind of miss the boat in what that love is. And they don't really want a whole lot from us. And we assume they do. So like can you help us, those of us that maybe are struggling with how to be present with them or how to unshield that heart? Like what does that look like? And how did you learn that like what that was when you started to give them more of that part of you?
It's just what you said, unshielding your heart and letting them see all of it and all of you. And that's what I did. And maybe I did it a little bit before Sean passed away, telling them how I felt and talking about feelings and, owning it when I went off on them and apologizing, something, our parents didn't do. And but when he passed away, it was like there was no way to hide my feelings. And because I'm a very emotional person, so maybe there are people who can totally block that, but I couldn't. And so instead of trying to hide it, I let it be. And if I was in the car with them driving to soccer practice and a song came on that reminded me of him and I started crying, I would say, I'm really sad. Remember this song? Dad loved this song. And they saw me crying. And then I would ask them how they're doing and how they're feeling. And we would talk. And so they've seen me in all the beautiful emotions and healing emotions and the ugly emotions, the not so pretty, the bad emotions. You've seen the whole range of emotions in me. And I've never denied any one of those emotions. I've embraced them and I've talked about them. Even jealousy, like, man, I'm really jealous of that family. And this is why. And because I can do that with them, they have no problem telling me how they feel. And that's so important because of their mental health, because that's like the number one thing I'm looking at right now. I don't care about anything else. I just want to make sure that their mental health is intact and that they're taking care of themselves and that they're safe, they feel safe and sharing. So I think I'm modeling that for them, that in our home, we can talk about anything and we can even raise our voices at each other or throw things around, as long as we're kind and respectful. But this is a safe place and we can be who our real authentic selves with each other.
Oh, I love that. I really respect what you're doing and how you're doing this with the kids. You had mentioned an article you had read about the number one way to support, the number one thing that is the biggest support for kids after a traumatic event. And can you share a little bit about that? Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't remember where I read it, but it was soon after Sean passed away when I wasn't taking care of myself. And it was like my light bulb moment. I read a quote that said, the outcomes for children who've experienced trauma are largely dependent upon the resilience and coping skills of their mother. And of course, it could be of their parent, but a lot of research has shown that the relationship that children have with their mother is a lot more influential on their well-being. And that was a turning point for me. That's when I was like, okay, I can't create this healthy, nurturing, healing space for my children if I'm pouring in shit, right? Like I have to take care of myself.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize too, like you're doing just that when you are being raw. Sometimes we think taking care of ourselves is again shielding it and putting the makeup on and looking good and showing our kids from the outside everything's fine. But as we said at the beginning, like that nothing good comes out of pretending to be fine. Being fine is doing what you're talking about, having raw moments, having sadness, having anger, having questions more than answers. Like those are the things that our kids need, because that's what life is going to throw at them as they get older. And so your kids have a head start in some ways through a tragic event that's teaching them some of life's social skills that many people don't really go through life learning. And it's unfortunate it had to go that way, but you're also using it as an opportunity and not protecting them from that. I think sometimes our kids show us more than we realize, like whether it's about resilience, about honesty, even about healing. And I'm wondering if we can just talk a little bit about your kids' voice in the process of loss. So if your children were here right now and I had a moment with them, what would they say if I had asked them about what do they need from adults who are supporting kids through grief and loss? Like what would their response, do you think?
I think that my son would say, just let me be
Oh,
and let me come to you for help. And I say that because there was a moment where I was like, are you okay? How are you feeling? How's your heart? How's your mind? Are you having dark thoughts? Like, I was just in panic mode and like really trying to get him to talk. And he said, Mom, sometimes I just need you to say like, hey, that sucks or this sucks. If you need anything, let me know. And that stuck with me. And that's what I do now. I really try to be mindful of the right moment to talk to him and the right amount of words to use, the right words to use. And so I think that's what he would tell an adult. Just let me lead the way. And I think that's great. I think children should lead the way. And I think they do lead the way. You just have to slow down and pay attention and shut up, basically.
yeah.
My middle one would tell an adult, but also children, because she has told me this before, that she wishes she could explain to her peers that she will always be sad and she will always miss her dad. So in other words, like we've said, grief has no timeline. It has no finish point. And I like that she understands that, because then she doesn't feel this pressure to like fix anything. Right. And she said that to me because a couple of people compared her loss to their loss of a grandparent and told her, well, I'm okay now. And it's so different. But how do you tell a young child that it's so different without being rude or getting emotional? And so that's what my middle one would say. My younger one, I think she was too young. She had just turned 7, 6 days before he died. So I'm not really sure what she would say to an adult. I think she's still kind of like in her own bubble of grief and understanding. She just needs hugs. That's all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And
Yeah.
you beat me to it, because I was going to also ask what the kids would want to say to other kids going through pain. And so you shared what your middle one would say. And I get 7 years old. There's a different level of processing developmentally, a lot more of being there. And like you said, the hugs and the feels. What would your older son, what would he say if he was going to support other kids through similar pain?
He would say, you just have to keep going.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And I think he would probably say that I know it can get really hard because it gets really hard for me. He has struggled probably the most out of the three, or I should say, really, he's struggled the most openly. His struggles and his grief come out in anger. And that's something we see more easily than, the quiet emotions like sadness sometimes. So I think he would tell other kids that you just have to keep going and things do get better.
Yeah. Aw, so well said. I appreciate that. Siblings. I was talking to you about this earlier. And for me, siblings are such a big part of upbringing. I think, especially in South Asian families, at least while we're kids. I know things get complicated when we get adults, but as kids, our siblings are the ones that walk beside us through the trenches, the chaos, even the quiet moments that we're going through in our family, in our household. Sometimes they're our first friends, sometimes they're our rivals, or all these sort of things in between. And in some way, they're also our witness when we're going through pain. And so, just curious what the relationship between the siblings has been like, and if you've noticed a change or a difference, or even maybe you guys do something, in a different way as siblings. Has that come up for you guys as through your grief?
Yeah, I haven't seen too many changes in their relationships. I would say the girls, my two girls who are 17 months apart, they're almost inseparable now. And I don't know if that's because of the loss or because they're just growing older together. But I have seen that. I've seen my son take on this like kind of fatherly role in the house with the girls and, just telling them how things should be and how they need to act. But again, I don't know if I do feel like that probably is a result of the loss, but then it could also be that he's the older brother and they're getting older. But it's funny because I've never thought about this before until you asked this question about their relationship. I've never heard them talking about their feelings with each other. They talk about their dad a lot together. A couple nights a week, I don't sit with them at dinner. I know that sounds weird, but I will just try to get a head start on the night stuff. I'll be in the kitchen, but I do it because I notice when I'm not sitting with them, the three of them talk a lot. And so I'm still here and I'll interject here and there, but I let them do that a couple nights a week. And when they do, I do hear them talk a lot more about their dad and memories and, oh, we have to do this because dad wanted us to, and that kind of thing. But I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I've never really heard about them. I've never really heard them talking about how they're feeling about dad together. So I'm gonna look out for that. Maybe even ask them about that.
Yeah, keep me in the loop.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
developmentally too, they're going to be at different places at different times, and so yeah, that could be another phase or what. But I love what you're doing, like giving them that space, because you're right. When we're not there, a lot of stuff happens, and when we're not meddling or being in the middle of, you be nice to your sibling and blah 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 blah, they got to figure that stuff out. And so I think that's
Yeah.
interesting that you are again being so intentional and observant and watching like how this process is unfolding for them. Can I ask what you shared with them when Sean died? How you did have the conversation with them?
Yeah. I Well, when we first told them that day, a volunteer chaplain had come from the police department just to sit with me and be a kind of like a source of support. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And he convinced me to tell them the truth from the minute that they got home. And so he encouraged me to keep their day the same. I didn't pull them out of school. By the time they got home, my cousin from an hour away had reached my house. And so my kids came home, and I just said that this is Chaplain so and so, and he's here to talk to us. And we sat in another room, and he said very matter of factly, your dad died today. And then all three of them had really different expressions. My son just went very quiet, and the tears just kind of slowly went down his cheek. My middle one looked shocked, didn't say one word. And the youngest, who's the most expressive, started crying and looked at me and said, "Is this a joke?" And I had to tell her, no, it's not. And then, of course, they wanted to know how he died. And so the chaplain told them that he ended his life today. He shot himself. And we kind of just sat with that for the rest of the day. And my cousin was there, my parents came. And then either later that day or the very next day, they asked me, what does that mean? Like they knew what happened, but why? What does that mean? Why would he do that? And for them, it was interesting because my son said, I don't understand. We just moved here. He wanted to be here and we just bought this new boat and we're going to do this. Like that's how
Yeah,
kids are
for
thinking.
sure.
You have all the things, right? You have all the things. Why would you not want to be here? And so in that moment, I just quickly thought, like, how can I tell them? How can I explain to them what suicide is? And also reassure them that this had nothing to do with them or us or his love for us. So I asked them, I started talking about our minds and the colors and the visions in our mind. And I asked them to describe what the inside of their mind looked like. And so everybody responded with like bright green, rainbows, purple. And I said, yeah, that's how my mind looks as well. But for your dad, it must have been very dark and gray. And he must have felt trapped in this black space. And he must have felt so much pain that he thought there was no way he'd see light again. And he wanted to end it. And I think they got it in that moment. I think it still required reminding. And I think even now, 2.5 years later, I have to sometimes remind them that he had depression and anxiety. He didn't get help. He felt very alone. And it got to be too much for him.
Yeah. I remember you sharing this during our consult, and it sat with me for a while because you, like, again, I'm just trying to imagine myself in your place. This is so fresh, so raw. It just happened, like waiting all day for my kids to come home to tell them. This is something that I think no parent ever wants to have to do, and here you are doing it. And you said something so big, important to me, which was like, this is kind of that moment where they're going to carry this forever. The moment where they find out what happened and how it happened. And you wanted to be prepared and mindful. I mean, as prepared as you could be in the moment. And I think I have so much respect for you and how you've been working through this process, like for yourself, but also being there and present for the kids and really thinking about that. Okay, this is something they're going to have to carry. And I think we protect kids so much when it comes to death, when it comes to grief. We don't want them to be at funerals. We don't want to tell them why someone important to us passed away, why we're emotional. And I think kids, as young as they are, when we as parents go through such a tragic thing, they may not have the words and they may not have the way to describe what's happening, but they have the energy and they have the feels more than anything because they're the most innocent and open, So I think we have to all look at that too, is even though we think we're protecting them in the moment, your kids could have still read your energy and made sense of it in their own way. And they're still going to do that. But when you open the door to grief in the way that you have with them, I think you've done it so beautifully. Like there's no fucking manual that comes with this to say, go to page 17B when this happens. And you're creating this manual and this process along the way. And you're doing it in a way that I really appreciate. And I think a lot of people are going to get some support in a way that we haven't been able to have in our community. And I just want to thank you for how you are showing up for those kids. Very meaningful. And I hope you, do you see that? Do you give yourself credit? Do you validate yourself as a mom and how you've been showing up for them?
That's really nice of you to say. I got goosebumps when you were saying those things. I really appreciate that. I think I do feel validated when I see my kids going through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everybody on the outside says it too, which is so wonderful to hear. And I do feel that I'm making an impact, but the three voices that will forever guide me are those of my kids.
Yeah.
So when I see that they're thriving, or when I see that they really get excited about the things I'm doing, that gives me peace of mind, and that reassures me that I'm on the right path. And I do want to mention about being truthful with the kids. I've kind of thought about this recently. If I had not told them the truth, and if they went on thinking their dad died by because of a heart attack or something, right? Or in his sleep, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I wouldn't be on Instagram sharing our story. I wouldn't be talking to people behind the scenes about their husband who's struggling, or, the mom who lost her husband to an overdose and the teen is struggling. I wouldn't be doing any of that. And so I think that the advice the chaplain gave me that day was the best advice. And I have been honest with the kids from that point. I mean, they've asked me some really tough questions about that day, about the loss, about what I saw, about, why did you marry dad if you knew he was like this? Really hard questions. And I might not tell them everything that's in my mind and heart, but I do have the conversations with them.
Yeah. And I think they're going to appreciate you in the future. Sometimes they don't know how to tell us these things, at the age, but look at us. We grow up and we look back and we know what we're grateful for that our parents did for us. And then we know the things that we didn't get, and we're trying to make sense of them now. And we'll never know if we've done a good enough job as parents. But I think if we're present and at least thinking like, I'm doing this because of this, and I'm hopeful for that. I think that's the key, is like doing it in the intentional way that you have been. And that honesty, I mean, kids only know how to be honest. So like, it's such a disrespect when we choose to not be honest with them, because they know these things. They can read us, they feel our energy. And so here we are trying to spend all this energy covering something up that, also, like you said, then wouldn't have been an opportunity, a door opening for something else because of the fear and the worry and whatever it is that grounds us to not do these things. And so I am glad that you went the route that you did for their sake, but also selfishly for the rest of the community too, who needs people to, help us. You and I talked about stats earlier. I said, I didn't show up with any numbers, and you're like, I didn't either. And I think we both agree, like, these conversations are the data collection that we need for our community to build those kinds of stats of like, what are the numbers and all that, because numbers are skewed. Nobody wants to report that it was death by suicide because of the shame and the guilt that the ones that are left behind that have to carry. And you're doing this in a way that is working through a lot of that. And so I'm just wondering if we can kind of take a trip back in the time machine to when little Reshma was growing up. And like, did you grow up in a home where you guys talked about mental health and grief and loss and those things? Like, I'm curious how you made sense of it growing up as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about mental health. I don't even know when that phrase came about, right? Mental health. No, we didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about, certainly not grief and loss. And I lost relatives as a child, and we didn't talk about, I don't even think anyone asked me how I felt when we lost relatives. Like, I would cry and they'd say, it's okay. And so-and-so was old, or so-and-so was sick. And then you're supposed to just move on. So I don't think anyone asked, how are you feeling? And I don't think I really understood what grief meant until recently, until losing Sean. And definitely now that I'm on Instagram and I'm sharing, and I'm also learning from others in the grief space, I know so much more. And I went through grief before losing Sean. I lost a baby when I was 30 weeks pregnant. So I had a stillborn child in 2010. And even then I don't think I ever used the word grief. I just processed on my own and I moved forward. So it's interesting to think about when those terms actually started becoming a part of our vocabulary.
That is interesting. What sense do you make of that?
I think it's just the way our parents operated, right? Like nobody's supposed to feel anything but happiness and joy. And if the problem can't be fixed with food, then we just don't talk about it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, good old
Yeah.
cup of tea. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's well said. We just want everyone to be okay, and we spend so much time trying to do that more of us aren't okay than just
Yeah.
allowing us to, like you said, work through those emotions that you go through a day, happy, sad, mad, and all the other elaborate ones in between. And yeah, we try so hard to just be fine. And yeah, it's rough sometimes to see that with elders and caregivers and loved ones when you know they're hurting, but they don't have access to how to get that out. I don't know if you have any advice for our community, for those that are listening or viewing today, like how to flip that script.
Well, I think that the issue was that most of our parents were immigrants, right? And so they were, and then now we're learning more about generational trauma and how, and just how that like sits in your body and it passes on to the next generation. And I think that they had a lot of their own stuff going on, and they came to their new countries with very little support, very little connection. And I think that's why sitting at dinner, we didn't get asked about our feelings, because they were going through their own feelings and their own stuff and just hustling to make it. And they didn't have the time or the space, not just for us, but for themselves. And so that is what I would encourage our generation of South Asians to keep in mind, that we have to make the time and the space for our feelings and for our healing. And we have to instill that in our children so that they carry on doing the work that our parents needed to do more of. What do you think? I
Yeah,
feel like
I'm 100% with you. I think even if we take it a step, further back, and I know I say this all the time, but it's how I'm making sense of it. Like even how our caregivers and elders before they even came here and that survival mode, they were already operating that way in the motherland with the impacts of colonization without really knowing that. And so being in generations of fear and, stand in a straight line, essentially being told what to do, it makes so much sense. Like you're cut off from any feeling or whatever. You're just like robots, like you said you were, right? Operating for a while there of like, I just got to get through. And so I'm just the shell of a body. And we've been so privileged, being those of us that are born here or are in North America, like we're so privileged to understand what space means, to be able to openly grieve and work through some of these things that our parents can't. And I think that's what helps me go back and work through like angry Kieran when I was so mad at my parents all those years of like, how dare you, and I'm going to go be white now. And now I'm like, oh, I get why I did that, but I also get why, like, my parents didn't hate me. They're working through their shit, like you said. And so we have to have compassion, for that, and in order to have that for us to break barriers. And the whole I turned out fine thing, I don't like that. I hate that. I hate when I hear that, because it's like we didn't turn out fine. And if
Yeah.
we did turn out fine, okay, but is there not room to like break some barriers so we can feel better, and so our kids and the next generation you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I think you're right about survival mode is where they're
And
at.
I do want to say that even though we didn't talk about mental health or share too much of our stresses, definitely didn't talk about grief and loss, I think that the fact that my dad was so emotional. He is an emotional person. And for his generation to be emotional and sensitive and to encourage you to cry and speak about what's bothering you, I was very fortunate. And so we might not have had like really in-depth conversations about feelings like I do with my children. I knew that he was a safe place for me. My mom is more reserved. That's just how her family is. And so she's very loving, but she didn't create that emotionally safe space for me. My dad did.
Right.
And I think that's why I've been the way I've been.
Yeah.
When it comes to I've just always been open about my feelings, and I've really looked inward because I was brought up that way.
Yeah. And I think the way, like what you're saying, the way we're raised shapes how we deal with pain, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes life forces us to learn, maybe like forces or encourages, however we want to word it, but to learn a new way of being, and which is what you're talking about as a next generation. And mindfulness can be such an important part of that path. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about that, which mindfulness, when we did the consult, you talked a lot about how being intentional, how that has helped you through this grief process, as well as it's what you're offering back to the community and how to work through this. But if we can just, before we get into it, I had a moment of clarity for once in a long time this morning when I was prepping, and I was thinking about this, and I thought, if we can just, before we step into this conversation about mindfulness, I just want to pause and name where these practices came from, because mindfulness is often treated like a new discovery in the Western world, and it's a buzzword. It's on an app, and it's something you find in a yoga studio with incense burning and soothing sounds and all that stuff. But the truth is, mindfulness has deep roots in our South Asian traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism. Our ancestors practice presence through breath, prayer, stillness, and movement. It's in our rituals. You talked about food, storytelling. Mindfulness was really, if we go back and look at our ancestors and our elders, it was never about escaping pain. Somehow that sort of got disconnected over the years. It was about being with it, witnessing it, and finding clarity in sometimes what we call, I guess, like chaos. And so these are not trends, they are teachings. And today, as we talk about mindfulness, I just want to recognize you for a second, Reshma, because you're carrying these teachings forward when you offer the support to our community, and you're not doing it in a performative way in which a lot of us who went to mental health school were taught, but you're doing it from a place of truth. And it's in how you've moved through loss, how you've shown up for your kids, for yourself, and then how you continue to ground yourself in these practices that have always, belonged to us. So I just wanted to remind all of us, like, that healing's not just possible, it's about our ancestors, and it can help a lot of us feel less alone when we're working through such a scary process. So I just wanted to take a moment and put that out there and thank you for doing what you're doing with our community. And now we can get into mindfulness.
Oh, that was really well said. And I think that was a really good reminder about the roots of mindfulness.
Maybe you can sort of take us through like how mindfulness has been a key part of your healing and your kids' healing.
Yeah, we started practicing mindfulness during the peak of the pandemic. So in the spring of 2020, I had always done yoga and, journaled and done some breath work. But it was during the pandemic when we were all forced to be at home, and I had to homeschool the three. And I was just looking for ways to break up the day with them. And they had done yoga as kids, but the other practices I started slowly bringing in. So we did movement and play, and then we would have a nature walk hour and would go out. And while we were doing that, we do, like a grounding activity where we're observing using our five senses. And then I got them a journal to guide some journaling and just intention setting. We did a little bit of meditation. So we were just kind of slowly learning about these practices individually and together as a family. And I saw that it really did create this shift in the energy in our home. And because of that, I then decided to get certified in kids yoga and mindfulness. And so the goal was to, once Sean got out of the Army, have my own business and do that while being able to stay at home with the kids and support him. I didn't realize how much of an anchor those practices would become, right? Until I lost Sean. So now it's like, this is not about let's dabble here and there. This is like, I have to do this every day or I'm going to spiral. And this for me is getting up an hour earlier before the house wakes up, having my tea, pulling out my journal, journaling. I have to share gratitude on a daily basis. We do a lot of positive self-talk. We share gratitude at dinner. So we have realized that each of us has something that works for us, and they're all different. And if we find that we're stuck, we know what to grab from our toolbox.
I love that. I think that's like the key to raising our kids, but we struggle with it. We get caught up in, like I said earlier, all this other hustle bustle stuff. And it's like, just go, just go, just go, just go. We don't take transitions and moments and recognize like, this is hard. Maybe I need to change up my day or not go and do that thing that I had planned to do because I need to work through some of this stuff. What do your kids say? Because I can imagine for some kids, it's like, okay, really, So sounds like you kind of implemented it at a young age, or they maybe didn't realize that this was like, but how do they respond to following through with some of these tools, these practices?
For the most part, they listen and they will go back to some of the practices. But then, of course, there are times where, especially because my son just turned 13 and he thinks he knows everything and he's so cool. So if I'm talking and I'm on a roll, he'll just shut me down and say, you're taking this mindfulness thing to another level, like, but I know that deep down inside, he knows that it's working for us and that it has worked for him. And I think it's when he hears people on the outside talk about it more, then he's like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for years. And so then I think he's more confident in it. You mentioned that we don't give ourselves time to transition and we don't slow down. And so parents are hesitant to bring this in to their world because it's like, a lot of people look at it as one more thing to do. And the thing is, it is one more thing to do. And it doesn't change things overnight. And you do have to try different things out before you find what works for you, because mindfulness is not a one size fits all thing. But if you do it in a way that it's very natural to you and very built into your day to day, it feels effortless. And I think that's what people have to realize before they make a decision on whether or not they need it in their life or they can afford to have it in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Would you say, like, is it still hard some days to be present with the pain?
Yeah, there's some days that it's hard, and there's some days I just shut everything down and check out. And that's okay. I mean, that's part of why this practice is so powerful, because you are totally in sync with yourself and you can recognize what it is you're feeling, why, and what it is you need to address that feeling. So if I can't handle it one day, I give myself permission to just stop what I'm doing and to let my kids and my family know that I can't be available now. I need time for myself and I'll check out. I'll go to my room, get in the bathtub, just totally check out and start over the next day.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of the next day is that we can try again. And being present isn't about being perfect. It's about
Mhm.
figuring out how to show up in that moment. And I think for a lot of our community, we sort of talked about this a while ago with our upbringings and just like the general histories of our community. Being alone in our mind can be scary, and we've seen this a lot with our moms, a lot of our elders. It's like rest is non-existent. You don't
Mhm.
stop, you keep going, 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 and sometimes it's a distraction, and that's sort of the tool that's being used. And for anyone that's like really wanting to go there, go be with their mind, go be still, and they're not sure where to start, how to start. Do you have any like feedback or advice on how we could take a small step towards it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what we have to do. It's about small steps. You're just going to have to give yourself a few minutes and then build upon that. And I think also it's really important to find the time that fits naturally into your day. It shouldn't feel forced, right?
Yeah.
Because if it feels forced, you're not going to do it. So I like to start in the morning, and I think it's easier to build in practices in the morning. So for people who do need to give themselves time and space to sit with their pain or their feelings, I'd say then you go to bed earlier, 20 minutes earlier so you can wake up 20 minutes earlier and you can give yourself 20 minutes of time to be with yourself before the rest of the world wakes up. And I always start my day by opening up my eyes and immediately saying, I'm grateful to be alive today before I even get out of bed. And then the very next thing I do is open up a shade and look outside. So these are like little steps, and then you just build upon them. And by the time you get downstairs and make your coffee, you've done all these really powerful, simple things that are going to help you heal over time.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. I think my great aunt, I was visiting her in London, and she taught me something she does that I borrowed, because I struggle at times to allow myself to be still with myself or go to certain parts of my memories and whatnot, and I'm trying to honor that a little more. And so she taught me the gratitude side. And so she's like, what one thing and plus she's like 70 and looks like she's like 50, like just looks amazing. And one thing that she does when she comes out of the shower is, and I lotion most of us South Asians have to lotion our bodies. And so she with from the bottom up, like when she's putting lotion on, whether it's her feet to her like legs, her knees, just acknowledging that these are my feet and I use these to walk and I'm grateful. These are my legs and my knees and they help me bend, and this really helped me because I have a lot of body issues and have a lot of expectations that are unreal about what my body should be and not, and working through that. And this has really helped me in the past year as well. It's like, oh yeah, my body is not meant to look sexy in photos. My body is meant to help me walk through this life, and I'm grateful that I have feet and I have these legs and I have these arms and these hands, and
Mhm.
and so like getting to this place from the outside, because the inside can be a little scary for some of us, and so I'm working my way to get to the inside of the brain part of,
Mhm.
so I think there are like, ways that when we talk to people, we learn, ways that maybe one may not work, my way may not work, but what you're suggesting might be something that's really helpful, of waking up in the gratefulness, and if it's even just opening the shade because we can't say we're grateful to be alive, then we're recognizing that this is where we're at, and this is how the day's looking, and this is how, just little ways, as you're saying, that can help us sort of be grounded and have our feet on the
Mhm.
ground. And I think that's the whole point. Like What would you say mindfulness is not, that maybe some of us have like a, like a different idea of it, and just sort of how the Western world sort of made it be too? What would you say it's not that maybe some of us believe it is?
I think a lot of people believe that mindfulness, I think people use that interchangeably with meditation.
Okay. Yeah.
And when they do that, they then think, well, I can't meditate because I can't vacate thoughts from my mind, And it's not that at all. Mindfulness, even meditation, is about being with the thoughts in your mind and recognizing the thoughts in your mind, but not judging them or questioning them, just being aware of them and letting them pass. Right. So I think that's something people have a misunderstanding about. And because of that, they're reluctant to try it.
That's well said. Right. Now that you said that, for sure, I feel the two can be sort of mistaken as one. And yeah, absolutely. And the fact of like, it's not for me. And I think that's even a place to start, is like, well, how do we know why it's not? Like being curious about that in itself too. For the longest time, I didn't care for it, didn't care for meditation, still struggle with it. But then I started asking like, why is it that it's not for me? And I'm starting to learn a lot of, again, stillness can be hard, and I need distraction. And where did that come from? What was I taught? All these kinds of things that are helping me get to this place of whether I choose to meditate or not, but realizing, oh, I do this in all different parts of the day where I try to not go through the transitions and whatnot. So I think just even asking ourselves, like, how come it's not for me, and when will it be, or how can it be? If I can shift, I do want to talk a bit about the silence and suicide and how they go hand in hand. And maybe if I can just ask one question, okay, maybe two about it, is what do you wish people better understood about suicide and the grief that follows?
I would want people to understand that I'm kind of speaking more from like the survivor's perspective. And I would want people to understand that suicide is not always predictable. And I'm not sure that I could say it's always preventable. People might argue with me on that one, but I'm thinking about my situation. And I think that there are signs that some people exhibit, but then again, in my case, there aren't signs always. And I would hope that people just understood that, because we see these suicide prevention campaigns, especially in September during the Awareness Month, and they list all these signs and they say suicide is preventable. And I think there was this study that came out recently where the people who answered it, a very large percentage said that they did believe suicide was preventable. And so for someone like me reading that hits hard. That stings, actually. And then it's like my guilt comes up all over again. And so just, it'd be nice for everyone to just keep an open mind and look for the signs, support the campaigns, but also just realize that not every case is the same.
Yeah.
And your question about the grief after suicide loss, I always say it's just as complex and complicated as the loss itself, meaning that it's really hard to understand. And it's very mixed in terms of the emotions that come up. Of course, there's heartbreak and pain and sadness, but then there's anger and bitterness. I was angry for a long time that my husband, the father of my kids, number one, did this. Number two, spent years refusing help and refusing connection and support. Now, when I look back on it, just from a different place and a different point in my healing journey, I look at it with so much more compassion. I've let go of a lot of the anger. But yeah, the grief is complicated and there are highs and lows. And, there are times where we might even feel relief because the moments, the months before he passed away were not good. And they were tense and stressful and scary. And we have peace in a way because we don't have that uncertainty, unpredictability in our home. I mean, for my kids especially. And so then you feel that way and then you feel guilt.
Yeah.
So it's like, all the emotions of grief after suicide loss are so complicated and so different.
What's something that you encourage us to keep in mind when working through grief like that?
To give yourself grace,
Mm.
to allow all the emotions to come in, to sit with them, and to just let them be. Don't question them. Don't judge them or yourself. Just be really gentle with yourself because everything you feel is normal and you're not the only one feeling those things, even when you feel like you might be.
Oh, yeah, that's well said. And when you share, I think that's where you really learn that, you're not the only
Mhm.
one. And I think you're also giving someone else a gift because they're like, oh my gosh, this person shared this information. I'm not the only one. So it's like this
Mhm.
positive chain that sometimes we forget when we keep it inside. Healing, support, what comes next? So you offer supports to people who are going through grief and loss. What kind of support do you offer to those navigating grief, and where can people find you if they want to reach out after this conversation?
Yeah, right now I'm offering one-on-one support for anyone who's not just learning how to navigate life with grief, but even just mental health challenges or for someone who needs grounding and centering in their lives. And so those sessions are weekly, and in an hour, we talk about where you're at, what you need more of, less of. And then we learn, or I teach mindfulness practices and then learn together what works and what doesn't. And the most important thing is just figuring out how to bring those practices into somebody's life in a really natural, rhythmic way so that they can move forward and use those practices without even thinking about them. My son and I just decided to start a grieving teens support group.
Yes.
So we have a 6-week series starting very soon, and it will be me and him leading a group of teens, whether they want to share or not, but just talking about grief, what it looks like for teens, how it feels, and then I'll offer up different practices to help them, reflect and just connect with themselves and their feelings. And I'm on Instagram. That's where I do most of my sharing and communicating, connecting. And my handle is just Reshma Kearney. And I have a website too, same name.
Yeah, and we'll put that info in our show notes when this comes out. I think that's amazing. Like, high five to your son. Please pass that on. I love,
Thanks.
love, love teens. And when teens are in a place to give back, oh my gosh, that's amazing because we learn so much from them. So I think this is amazing that he is joining you and you two are doing this together.
Thanks. I think
That's
it'll be
great.
really good for him. Yeah, I think it'll be really good for him too.
Yeah, it's a gift, a give and receive. I think there's something in that for sure. So I'd love to hear how that goes. And maybe he'll come on after you guys do the
Yeah.
program. Maybe he has some, tidbits and whatnot. You two can come on and share together. So that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So is there anything today that you wish I had asked you or that we talked more of or that maybe you want to go back and clarify, add to?
I think I would just want to leave reminding everybody to just be kind, to be kind and compassionate. And after listening to this, just go outside and smile at someone and check in on people, check in on the people that look like they're okay. We always say, check in on your friends when they're quiet or they don't seem to be themselves, but just check in on people, period.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. I want to give a shout out to our friend Zach, who connected you and I together.
Mhm.
He has a Canadian podcast. He has the campaign with Mental, and
Mhm.
something that I learned through him was when you ask someone how they are, ask them twice, because sometimes we say
Mhm.
we're okay, we're fine, and we need to be asked that second time to be able to say, actually, I'm fine. And
Mhm.
let me tell you this. So I appreciate that. You kind of gave a call to action when you said to be kind, so I won't ask you for another one. But
Mhm.
lastly, if we could, before we go, we can do our middle fingers up. We say, we close with a lot of rebellion, or maybe a little rebellion and a lot of heart. So if you were going to put your middle fingers up to something, what would that be?
To silence.
Ooh,
Let's put our middle fingers up to silence, right? Yeah.
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 Well said.
We just have to keep sharing and keep talking and connecting because that's really the foundation of healing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Okay. I just want to thank you for sharing your truth, your story, the tenderness that lives in between the heartbreak and the healing. I think you really helped pull that out today, and I appreciate that. To anyone listening, these conversations are door openers. We're just starting to scratch the surface. If you want to add to this conversation, you know where you can now reach out to Reshma. You know where you can reach out to us here at MFU. If you're grieving, if you're walking beside someone in pain, or if you've ever felt the weight of the silence after suicide, we hope you know that you're not alone. There are supports out there. This conversation doesn't offer all the answers, but it's here to remind us that presence is powerful and that being seen matters. And so we don't have to fix the pain. We're just trying to figure out how to sit with it. And maybe that's where the healing begins. So middle fingers up to that silence, to that stigma. Thank you again, Reshma, for being here with us.
Thank you so much. I love your space. I think it's so important for South Asians to realize that we can use our voices and be authentic and unite in that, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Me too. Thank you. Thanks for making me cry. Or making me feel safe to cry. Maybe that's what it is, eh?
Yeah.